Hello, everyone, and welcome to 2018. This is the first episode of the new year of Days of Future Cast. It's me, Jeremy, your friend, co-host, and possible cousin? I don't know. Anyway, if you'd like to support the show, you can always do so by going to Duckfeed.tv. No, that's not a real site, y'all. It's patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv. And donating to the Patreon. Yeah, just a couple of dollars a month will get you access to cool stuff, and it's a fun place to be, I promise. We're finishing up this episode. We're getting close to finishing up Season 4, so go ahead and get your feedback and thoughts in. That's daysoffuturecast.com/contact. And yeah, enjoy this episode. We'll see you next time.
Start the ball.
I'm Jeremy Greer.
And I'm Gary Butterfield.
And this is Days of Future Cast. We are stuck in a time loop, and we can't get out of this without a fucking time bishop idiot coming after us. What are we going to do, Gary? In the podcast.
Here's a bunch of impersonations that kids will understand.
Oh, my God. What are we going to do? Jim Carrey.
Jeremy, how you doing?
I'm doing well. We're recording this in December. I don't think it'll be out in December, but we're recording this in December. And as listeners of the show may know, I've been in the middle of a home remodel. We've been doing a lot of work on the house. I sent you a picture of my Resident Evil bathroom, which looked really appropriately spooky, I think. And we're coming up to the end of that. This is a Wednesday. The guy said he'd be done and out of my house by Friday, and everything will be finished. So
okay.
Except for all of the stuff that I have to do, but all of the hard stuff will be done. So I'm extremely good. Like, it's nice. Like, new floors in the house. I'll have a whole new shower that I can do whatever I want to in. Mostly shower, but I can do some other stuff in there if I want to.
Yeah. If anybody, like, someday I'm going to visit you and I'm going to figure out what the worst possible thing I can do in that shower is. And here's a spoiler: it's not shit or drop a load. Like, I'm going to have to use my imagination.
Honestly,
because that's obvious, predictable.
This is really toilet talk this week, Gary.
Yeah, just keep it on brand.
Like, that's probably the best place in the house you could drop a load.
Yeah,
like, we have a drain and a water fountain, like, not fountain, but like a shower head right there. Like, we could just watch it. Like, I'd be mad at you. I'd be like, "What the fuck, Gary?" Yeah. But it wouldn't like ruin a floor or anything.
Yeah, I think that I gotta use I've got to like cook a steak in there or something like that. Like, there's probably something you could do that would cause like a bigger mess. That the drain would not.
If you fuck up my tile, I'm going to kick you out of the state.
Okay,
I'm just going to say that.
I'm going to ban you from Louisiana.
You somehow like stain my grout, and you're fucking out. Like, that's it.
Grout, sun's out, grout's out, grout's out, you're out. I'll keep that in mind.
How about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. A little bit under the weather, but doing all right. These episodes have not been the slog that I was kind of expecting based on the experience of watching them, so I'm happy about that. And eager to get on with it. We took a little break. You walked some dogs.
I did.
I did some internet chatting. I was telling everybody, just to give everyone an idea, this will come out like way later than this, but today is the day, Tinsley did this, that Patreon reversed their bonehead decision. So I was posting in the Slack that happened, just so people know that for the people who, I wrote in letters, but that's what I was encouraging people to do. A bunch of people asked me, they said, like, what are you guys planning to do about this? And I was like, hey, they might back off because the response has been more negative than anything in the world. Write in letters, like, let them know that it sucks. And enough people did that. It seems like they have pulled back from the brink.
I will say too, they sent out an email, and since I have two Patreons myself, and I'm also loosely associated with the Duckfeed Patreon, I got that email to the creators, and it seems sufficiently apologetic, right? We fucked up. I'm so sorry. We sorry. There's no apology that can cover this, but we're so sorry, and we're going to check in with you from now on. Like, that seems like a pretty decent mea culpa to me.
I have a lot of tolerance for any a genuine apology. Like, that goes a long way, where, like, if it's just like, oh, hey, I did this wrong and I'm going to try not to do it. Like, I literally don't know what else you can ask for.
Sure.
You know? That's because the past, you can't undo history. It's not X-Men. Like if they had the cable computer, they could go back in time and fix it. However, that's fiction.
And let's be real. I don't want Patreon to have access to a cable computer or the time nexus. That seems like a bad plan.
No. Yeah, not remotely. If I'm choosing any organization to have, get a hold of that, it's not going to be Patreon. I don't even know what organization it would be.
It'd be something. It'd have to be a
DSA.
nonprofit. Like I want somebody that doesn't make money. I don't want any capitalist pigs having access to the fucking time travel business, because that just is not going to end up good.
Like Democratic Socialists of America get that. That's
sure.
It.
Yeah.
So for now I'm willing to take them in good faith until something like this happens again, and hopefully they are going to try to work it. And it's so dumb, because the way to fix it literally would have been there's lots of ways to do it. One, when you sign up for a Patreon, you check and say whether you want to get charged now or whether you want to have your patronage start at the beginning of the month of the next billing cycle. Mm-hmm. That puts everyone's billing cycle on the same thing. Or you just make it opt in. You just have a little thing that says yes, I want my entire pledge to go to the creators. I would like to pay the service fees, because for some people, they genuinely would want that,
Yeah, absolutely. Some people want to support that and make it easy. Yeah.
Yeah. It really is just a breakdown between people who cover a lot of Patreons and people who only cover a few. So for myself, I have a $20 a month Patreon budget that's spread out among about 7 or 8 different patrons. So I'm paying, under the new system, I would end up paying, roughly $3 or $4 extra, which is not insignificant. It's, almost 25% of what I do. It's not that much money in total, but it's more money than, it's a big percentage. But there are people who patronize us, and I'm not saying this is a brag, it's just something I happen to know to be true because I've heard from them, who just patronize us. That's all they do. They're not really part of the Patreon ecosystem. They just like Duckfeed. And
that was me for a long time. Just to shout that out. That was you guys were my exposure to Patreon, and it wasn't until way later that I started supporting other things on Patreon. And it was because it was so easy. Here's my $5 and I can support them, and I just want them to know hey, I want you guys making art or making whatever out there. Do your thing. Here, hopefully this helps you eat.
Yeah, and it's not that uncommon. And for people, for that, if you give $5 and this new system, you would have paid an extra 40 cents or something, it wouldn't have been a big deal. So that's the biggest issue, is it was disproportionate, and they should have just made it optional, because then it would have resulted in creators making more money from people who don't want their money to go to Patreon, and then it would have also not pissed off people who the fee would impact. Quite a bit. So it is, they obviously fucked it up. It's just dumb that they say they're reconsidering it. They're trying to find a different way to do it. I hope that other way to do it is, something like that, making it optional. I think that's the smartest thing to do if they want to move forward in some way.
Almost every single creator that I've talked to or that I saw tweeting about this all said hey, let this be opt-in for the patron. Let them choose whether or not they don't want to, and then if they say no, we'll cover it. That's not a problem.
Yeah, we're covering it now.
We would rather lose money and keep the patron than we would get more money and lose patrons. That's the opposite of what we want to do.
Yeah, and it's not actually going to the fee, because for us it is, it would be per patron. If they did something like that, it would probably balance out. The number of people who just said hey, we'll take the fee, and you guys can make the greater additional money. It would probably still end up resulting in the patrons who wanted to have that relationship being happy and the creators making, roughly the same amount of money. They probably wouldn't lose that much money from it. And I can only speak for our Patreon, but I don't think we would lose very much money from it. Not that we it's ultimately, it ends up not really being about how much money you're making, because that was never going to be a huge thing. It's more about how they rolled it out and making it, non-optional and kind of sticking everybody with it.
And with no communication. I remember,
really shitty communication.
I saw people tweeting about this way before I got an email from either one of my Patreons about it. That was the shitty thing. And so I was wait, what is going on with Patreon? I go to my email, I don't see anything. And then 6 hours later, I get whatever MailChimp delivered bullshit and I was I already know about all of this, Patreon. You've already fucked me earlier on Twitter. Now you're fucking me in a different way. And that's the thing that they...
or go ahead, sorry.
That's the thing that they address in quote unquote Jack's post in the email that they sent out, is just hey, we should have communicated, like, this goes against our business practices. We should have done these things better. And if they actually follow through with that, and the concern that I have with Patreon is it's became so big so fast, and they've raised so much venture capital, that they have to start turning profits now. And that's, at the end of the day, like, it's a business can survive on a certain amount of profits, but if the moment that you say, like, you have to grow month over month and year over year, you're fucking that business. You're going to fuck your customers eventually, period. Like, no matter what you do, you're going to do that.
It's never been that they're not making a profit. Like, they've been making a profit this entire time. It is just venture capitalists who want more profit because capitalism is the worst.
Yep.
And that's the thing, the frustrating thing about Patreon is that it is a way to kind of sidestep a traditional, like, way of living in a capital, living within capitalism. Like, it's still capitalism related, but it's not quite as crass. Like, it's not, it is relatively independent and kind of outside that. And it's still being affected by that, though. There's no getting out of the system.
The biggest positive that came out of this, other than, Patreon reversing all of it, is the fact that I think this probably galvanized several other competitors that were starting to roll out their solutions, and now that probably are realizing, like, wait, we should definitely have this here for the next time that Patreon missteps, so that we can capture that audience, because there's nothing wrong with like, it feels weird as a creator. Like, I hate to even use that term for myself, but it feels weird as someone who has a Patreon that I would, like, start another support service on another service, but it's not like I'm just want to make it easy for people that want to support the show to support the show. Like, I'll have a tip jar, a PayPal link, whatever makes it easy for you to want to support the show. I want that to happen.
Yeah. And if you want that, make it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, the thing about the competing service too, though, is that, like, a lot of people brought that up, and it is an option, but it's not as simple as it seems. Like,
no, you're not just going to move a bunch of people over. Like, you're just not going to do that.
There's a lot of momentum. So, like, just literally just jumping ship to another ship, like, there are probably people who would just like, well, I have to sign up for a new thing. That's not worth my $1 a month. Like, that would make a very big difference. Running both of them in tandem is an option, but that doubles a pretty significant amount of work as far as setting up posts and setting up RSS feeds and setting up polls and everything. I mean, just, again, speaking just from our perspective, like, it would have been a lot of work to do that. Like, I went through the trouble of grabbing an invite for Drip, which is the big competitor now. Like, talk to, put out my feelers, see who has an invite, who's able to give us one, like, got us an invite if we want to use it. But it would be difficult. It would be a lot of work, and, like, not complaining, but we, believe it or not, like, we did just talk about, like, toilets and shitting for most of last episode, but we do a lot of work. And doubling that part of that thing would be significant. Like, it would be harder to put out as much stuff. Not impossible. Couldn't say we wouldn't do it, but it'd just be a lot of work. So, and also not saying it's not worth it, just that it's not easy. So I would rather stick with the service where we've already built up our audience and become established, and just have them stop being assholes.
Exactly. That's the better. That is the way better solution here, because I heard several people told me, like, well, Patreon is not even really worth the effort to go into it. And, like, in my limited experience with Patreon, it's extremely worth it. Like, it's a central place for people to go to. They can see all of the people that they support, the tools that they give me to be able to communicate with my patrons and with, people that listen to my shows are way better than anything that I've seen anywhere else. Like flat out. And, like, the way that I can segregate that between different tiers, and I can hook an RSS feed into it if I want to. I can hook Discord invites into it if I want to. I can do all kinds of different stuff, because they have built that platform over the last however many years. What has it been, like 5 years now or something? Yeah. Like, that's a good thing for everybody. Like, that's a good service. So they just need to stop trying to just, pull as much cash out of it as possible. Like, keep your profit, dude. We want you to make money. That's the thing that always kills me about these companies that do this kind of stuff, is I want Patreon to make money so they can make the service better, so that I could, relay that to my listeners, so that I can, make more money in my podcast. Not necessarily make more money, but, like, have more of an audience and grow the shows that I want to grow. So it's a weird thing.
It's a thing where, you want them to, on the internet, I feel like there is a real, like, just nothing being good enough. Like, even in the wake of this announcement, so, like, they did, to my mind, they did the thing to be expected, which is like, oh, hey, we messed up. We're going to try better. Here's how we messed up. Like, in the email you talked about, they said, like, hey, here's what your complaints were. Like, they restate it back. Like, they understand. There is, like, just a subset of just, like, there's nothing ever good enough. for in certain kinds of like online discourse in general. So like there has been a lot of like, you know, quote unquote, the discourse, shoot me, that today that has just been about like, well, actually, you know, there's still shit and here's why. And like it mostly has to do, most of the takes I've read about that have been like kind of petty takes that don't have to do with Patreon, it feels like to me. Like they have to do more with just kind of the reality of how much luck is based on hitting any kind of success tipping point. You know, so it's like, it's people who are mad at Patreon because, you know, this podcast that is by all accounts like very good, you know, pulls in like $40 a month, you know, and it's like, well, there's lots of reasons why that could be the case. And like, maybe some of them have to do with that service, but a lot of them probably don't. It just has to do with those people's like specific stomachs for self-promotion and just how much time has been, like how long they've been doing it. Like there are a lot of different factors. Not to like try to be, you know, Mr. Defends corporate America, because that's definitely not who I am. But it's just, I feel like it's not useful to complain about like to complain like inaccurately about something. Like if you want something to change, you have to have a very good idea of what the problem is and what needs to change. And it feels like there's a lot of people who are just kind of pissed in general and are taking this as an opportunity to kind of like shit on the service, which is not perfect. Like it took them all, you know, they've not been you know, it took them a long time to like shut down some pretty problematic campaigns, you know, on Patreon, things like that. Like they haven't been perfect, but like they have course corrected, you know, in the past based on feedback, which is more than you can say about lots of companies. It's more than you can say about, for example, Twitter, where all of this complaining is happening. You know?
I was going to bring up Twitter because they have been listening to all of our complaints about taking Nazis off their platforms, and today they rolled out native threading.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Thanks.
Thank goodness.
I mean, now Nazis can make 25 posts in a row and have them all nice and neatly organized. Thanks. Yeah. Twitter at Jack. Yeah, we appreciate that.
Thanks, Jack. It's you know, so there's just kind of I don't know. I'm not trying to say like, oh, people just complain for no reason. I'm just saying that like I feel like there is some complaining that could be a lot more fruitful if it was more focused and kind of solution based. You know.
But at the end of the day, like people aren't going to be happy no matter what you do. So you can only try to do your best, which is why I like to see things like, we're going to listen to you, we're going to communicate with you. And I mentioned this when we were talking about it on the Slack when it first started coming out. Like, I don't expect a phone call from Mr. Patreon. Like, my two little dinky Patreons that are very valuable to me probably don't add up in the grand scheme of things much to them. So I don't expect that phone call. But like, dude, I can make a poll. Like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, you've got so much venture capital, like hire a person to, you know, process an email response from a bunch of people, like, and try to, you know, develop that into like, well, you know, 60% of our users said that this sucks. Maybe we should think about not doing it. So.
Yeah. What it sounds like, they said that they worked with people. My guess is, if they're not just straight up lying about that, which like maybe they are, maybe they aren't, is that they worked with, to their mind, like they worked with like the highest, you know, it's like the Adam Carolla show and like the people who are making absolute gangbusters, and checked in with those people thinking like, oh, those are the people with the greatest vested interest in this, while ignoring like the middle class Patreons, like our Patreon, and more specifically, like totally destroying like the very small Patreons. Like there are a lot of small projects and such that are like, this pulls in $40 a month, but those people like, hey, that pays my you know, my cable bill. You know, like they need that, you know, as a thing. And the most of their patrons are very small dollar amounts and patronize a lot of different people. So they were adversely affected by this. Like we lost, you know, like 10, I think roughly 10 patrons from this over this, that like gave us that reason why. And we could absorb that. Somebody who has a much smaller Patreon, like 10 patrons could be 25% or 50% of their total patronage. You know,
that could be the difference per month on like, I have to work this part-time job, or I have to like spend 5 hours a week more at my part-time job so I can put food on my table versus making this art or making this cast or making this whatever.
Totally. You know, and it's like, that was the problem. So I think if they did talk to some people, they talked to the wrong people. And that's the lesson I hope they learned as well. You know, the fact that like they did this, maybe the like the super rich mega Patreons didn't, or you know, creators didn't freak out based on it, but maybe enough of the kind of middle ground and small ones did, that they realized, okay, well, we did a real classic mistake. Again, capitalism like made a real classic mistake at like just checking in with the people who make the most money about this, as if they were the only people whose personhood matters. And
just out of curiosity, do you know the top Patreon off the top of your head? Because I just looked it up. I'm curious if you can.
For a long time, it was Amanda Palmer.
Mm-hmm. She's number 4.
She used to make she used to be number 1 with $30,000 per anything she did, which I hate. I got so mad at that. Like, it's just like, well, I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing. Like, if I put out an album, if I decide to do an interpretive dance, if I put out a YouTube of me eating Cheerios, like $30,000, fuck you. And I hated that. But what is the number 1 now?
Chapo Trap House.
Oh, Chapo's number 1. I knew Chapo was huge. I didn't know they were number 1.
$88,000 a month.
That is a whole other conversation that like we could have here in the safety of the podcast, but not in the politics channel of the Slack, where a lot of people are very loyal to the Chapo guys. I have a very intense feeling that like if once you start making that kind of money, you have a responsibility to use it in ways other than just paying your rent. And I don't know that they are. It kind of drives me a little bit nuts.
And I'll probably cut some of this out because we're going along with this. We're 20 minutes into the podcast and have yet to talk about Cyclops yet. So, like just the general reaction around Chapo's Trap House is one of those things that has put me off of it, that I don't even need to engage with the media and to not like it. Like I just instantly despise it on site, and seeing stuff like that like just makes me even not like it more. And Autumn came home the other day and she was like, "Oh man, I listened to a Chapo Trap House and it was so good." And I like almost like irrationally got mad at her for listening to it. I'm like, she doesn't have my fucking hang-ups about this bullshit. Like, it's not her fault. She just wants to listen to a fun podcast about whatever. Like, I don't even know what the show is. I just hate it.
Yeah, I have a bias to it. I've listened to some of it, and I don't actually dislike it. I think it's good. I don't think it is transformative in the way that people I know who enjoy it enjoy it. It is the podcast version of like far left angry Twitter with more jokes, which like there's a cathartic angle to that. Is it a cathartic angle that I think is worth $88,000 per month? No. Like, I think that if I were these 3 something awful guys who like somehow lucked into that career, based on, political anxiety from, 2016 hellscape, I feel like a lot of that money should go towards practical change. And that's been like a huge debate with those guys, like whether they have a responsibility to do that. Like, I think they do. Not everyone thinks they do. I think that, but I mean, it's also something like anyone who makes $88,000 a month, it doesn't matter that it's Chapo. Like, I don't think you can morally make that much money without giving tons of it back. Like, that is an immoral amount of money. So, that's me. Yeah, I don't like wealth, and I don't like that people have it. So
it's weird. The thing that I was always that people always told me growing up is like, if you're a kid and if you're young and you're not a Democrat, that means you have no heart, and if you're old and you're not a Republican, that means you have no money. And like the older I get, the more I'm like, no, I want to take all of the money and give it to all the poor kids so that they can do stuff with it. Like, I want to give like 19-year-old Jeremy, whose heart went out to everybody before I got cold and cynical and bitter, all of the money in the world to do that stuff. Like, I want to give those people like all of the extra money that I have if I could do that.
Yeah, 1,000%. Like, the people think that as you get older, you become like more right wing and more conservative, and I have only gotten more radically left. Like, the older I get. And more into those causes. It's become more important to me, not less. So another, fucked up prediction on your part, guidance counselor.
Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Thomas. Yeah. I'm guessing is your name.
Yeah, you really dropped the ball on this one. It is, it's interesting. It is a weird time to be alive, for anything, and subsisting on Patreon is a weird job. And being at the whims of that company, just kind of deciding to fuck things up in that way is very stressful. And it is, the whole thing is complicated. I know that's kind of a hand wavy way, like everything is complicated, but this specifically is a complication that's been on my mind a lot. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, it makes sense, right? Like, this is literally your income. Like, you're 100% fully funded by Patreon. Like, I'm assuming, and like other gigs too, but mostly by Patreon. Yeah.
Patreon. I sell some books, sell a couple of books every week. I've done a couple other gigs, but for the most part, that's how I make my money. So, complicated. Also complicated, time travel. With Beyond Good and Evil Part 3, The Lazarus Chamber. After swiping the government's own time machine, Cable ends up recruiting the X-Men on his mission to destroy Apocalypse's source of immortality at its creation.
Which is, I mean, as plans go, this is pretty good. I like this.
Yeah, not so bad, because he says every time if they destroy the Lazarus Chamber later than its creation, Apocalypse can go back in time and fix it. Here, if they destroy it at its creation, it's like a race from the time stream or whatever, and they can't do that.
Yeah.
So we spend most of this time in the year 4000, or at least the beginning of it, dealing with Cable's weird ragtag group of nobodies assaulting this government base.
Yeah, which I don't particularly care about any of this. Like, it's a good plan, but man, like they took one of my favorite animated series characters, but just specifically because he was so underused and so interesting and like kind of a little bit ambiguous and mysterious, and then just like give him a flat top guile haircutted son, and like now we have to deal with all of this stuff.
You remember when he was the wild man of Borneo? Like,
I do.
Now he is just, now what is this? It's like shitty, like third rate Terminator, like Terminator Genesis stuff. And the things they're fighting, like nothing in the future looks particularly cool. Like the gritty Days of future in X-Men I like. Here, so like he's got his trio of people. There's like Skullface guy, there's a girl, there's a guy who looks like Knight Rider. Looks like David Hasselhoff, except if he had a leather jacket made of Colossus.
Yeah. I feel like we've seen this dude before too. Like I feel like he showed up in that first episode with Bishop way back in season 1. Too.
Different guy. That's the guy who turns his arms into Colossus and runs through things. That guy's blonde.
Man, Colossus must get around, huh?
Yeah, Colossus is what they have instead of leather in the future.
they just raise free range Colossus on the field.
Colossi. Yeah, it's and then like as they're fighting, the robots and stuff they fight are so dumb. Like somebody comes out with a power loader from Alien and like fights them and like sweeps them around. Like it's really hard to tell exactly what's happening at any given point. You deal with Tyler, which just looks like a smaller version of Cable, like has his same proportions. He's just slightly smaller. It's real weird. Their plan is just a zap. It's a pretty annoying little infiltration scene without cool cameos and without cool looking robots and without cool looking technology.
And it sets up this dumb thing with Cable and his son where, his son is defending himself from a robot so that Cable can get into this while the infiltration team has disabled the defenses of this like Grey Malkin thing that they're looking for, this time travel thing. And like the son obviously like gets shot. And so Cable has to like spend 0.5 seconds debating whether or not it's worth it. And then even like his son is like, you're going to go back in time and fix all this. Like, don't worry about it. It's all good.
The son does say like, we're trying to make this so it never happened.
Cable, we went over this over and over again.
We have a whiteboard. We know. It is extremely silly. Also, whenever you have so if the infiltration team was going to bring down the defenses, like why didn't Cable just go in with the infiltration team? If they have people who can get in, like it's the same problem with Apocalypse teleporting into Lalandra's ship. Like if you can get in, just get in. I don't get it.
Just go do the thing.
I think watching it now, and this isn't made clear by the cartoons, so this isn't quite my fault. I think the infiltration team is somewhere else that turns off the control thing. Okay.
Because they're there to turn off the defenses of the other government facilities so that he can get the time travel machine. My favorite thing about this is that the time travel machine just looks like kind of a weird crab, and
it is a Metroid.
It's definitely a Metroid. Thank you. Yeah. It's enormous, and Cable is just flying it by himself, like against anything that we've ever seen in sci-fi. Like he just flies this motherfucker all by himself, and it's like, why?
Can I give you a gift to make?
Yeah. Totally.
If it's a real good one. At 5:40 in this episode, Cable is talking to Tyler. He has like a absolutely like phenomenal camel toe. 2, he shimmies down this mountain for a couple seconds, and it is one of the goofiest animations I've ever seen.
Did you see? Because a little bit after that, he does. They just rewind it so that he's going back up to talk to Tyler.
Love it. So he's flying the gigantic Metroid by himself, which is ridiculous.
It's absolutely ridiculous. And his whole goal is to go back in time to talk to the X-Men, right?
Yeah. I love the time speedometer as he's going through the years, just start going backwards.
Isn't that
as
great?
He flies through Rainbow Road, very funny.
Like just like imagine the science that goes into something like a time odometer. Is it tied to the pedal? Is it tied to like the weird Metroid hanger on things? Like, what is it?
I don't know.
How are you determining that?
And I love this Metroid landing on the X-Men's lawn where the X-Men are just having like their board meeting or whatever.
Well, the defenses are still down. Like, the wedding was yesterday. They didn't have time to put the defenses back up.
Like, that button takes a long time to push, guys. Yeah. Oh, man.
But he is there to basically try to find Apocalypse. He's like relaying his plan. And in the meantime, Beast and Shard are just like hanging out, and Beast is just using rando science to find Bishop. Like, he just like, well, maybe this happened, and then it just is. Like, that's the whole thing. That's all it is.
You call it deduction, but really it's a guess.
It's just a total guess. Yeah.
Total guess. And he has this little computer model on his screen that's showing somebody going through the time stream. It's a little like Silver Surfer mannequin character, and he's like, maybe this is your brother, which is real great.
Here's a fun thing that the thing that this is relaying right now, this like time stream jumper thing, is literally the plot of season 5 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. right now. Like, that's what happens. That's the first episode. Like, that's not a spoiler for people out there. Like, I guess spoiler alert, Agent Coulson lives. Like, that should be like a no-brainer at this point. But like, he literally gets pulled out of time into like a weird future time and like has to deal with a bunch of bullshit, which is kind of great in a weird live action show in 2017.
So we switch over. They have a prisoner. They have Sabretooth, and they're trying to figure out more about the plot. Archangel and Cyclops walk into Sabretooth to try to play, they're kind of like good cop, bad copping him, where Cyclops, bad cop, is just going, what? You're too stupid to do this plan on your own.
Yeah, thanks, Cyclops.
Yeah, okay.
We knew, everybody in the room knew that, including Sabretooth.
Yeah, I don't think Sabretooth is going to care that much about being called stupid. So then Wolverine comes in and goes, how about you let me torture him for a bit? And then they both go like nod and leave, which then happens. Like, the next time we check in with Sabretooth, he has been tortured. It is pretty good. It is very surprising. They like get into a fight and he just gets demolished here. So they got their answers using violence, kids.
And this is when Cable, to the rest of the X-Men, just kind of lays out like this immortality chamber, the Lazarus chamber, like what his whole plan is to try to get rid of it and everything. And of course, everybody is like, we have like one of our own in there. And Cable's like, I don't give a fuck about Jean Grey. Like, who the fuck is that?
Like, it does not matter. And also, that's your mom, dude. Why do you not care about this? When he's talking about the Lazarus chamber, they show like crazy Egyptian pharaoh Apocalypse come through, and that just brings up that question of those tubes. Like, at some point he gets those tubes put on. How has that happened? Because he used to be a pharaoh.
Also, it's a level of galactic appropriation we have not yet seen in this podcast. Just don't put hieroglyphs on your weird supervillain mutant and just call it a day.
I have no idea how you'd feel if you were an Egyptian watching this thing with Apocalypse. Like,
hey, and if you're an Egyptian out there watching this with us, Days of Future Cast /contact. We want the real shit.
Yeah, I would like to know how this comes off. So Wolverine drags in the be tortured Sabretooth.
How is Xavier okay with this?
Xavier does not. He's a sociopath. If we recall, he's not the best telepath. He's the most powerful.
Yeah, exactly. So at this point, they basically decide that they're all going to go in time to chase down Apocalypse, right? So this is where we divide up the team a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but this is after Xavier also steals this information from Sabretooth's mind. Like, Wolverine made him talk, and then Xavier like invades his mind to find out the Magneto's working for him. And he shows his little vision that shows like a bunch of things floating in front of a cartoon clock to show that it's time related. And then that's when they split the team. So not only
that's where you get that great line of portals, clocks.
Yes, I see portals, clocks, time imagery. So not only do they just allow Wolverine to physically torture Sabretooth, they're mentally torturing him as well. So again,
honestly, the victim in this episode, like, you would expect it to be one of the kidnapped psychics, but nope, it's Sabretooth.
Yeah, Sabretooth is 100%. So they split up the team. Xavier takes Cable, Cyclops, Beast, Gambit, Archangel, and Wolverine to go back in time, and they leave Shard behind.
I guess with the idea that if Shard being the only time traveling person out of this, like, if they fail in this endeavor, like, she can still go back in time and try. Like, it's like a failsafe, right?
Yes, like a classic Future Forge kind of move.
A plan B.
Yes.
And man, I like some of this stuff is like real neat, like with the way they're doing the art when they're traveling through time or whatever. But can we talk about this ship for a little while? Like, what the fuck is happening with this ship?
Like this gigantic, a mile-long bridge where all the X-Men just walk up, take seats at controls, and start using them as if
as if Cable didn't just fly it 4,000 years in the past by himself like 10 minutes ago.
Wolverine just walks up to a console and starts pressing buttons. It's like, okay, Wolverine.
Trying to find the reggae, bub.
Yeah, you were born in 1870. And you can fly this ship. Yeah. Love it. So they're flying through space. They go past. They wing Bishop. Bishop,
which is the best part of this. Yeah,
gets kind of mad.
Hey, watch it! Billions of miles of space and people still can't drive.
But he's okay. And Apocalypse knows this is happening because again, Apocalypse is in the time axis. He knows what's happening here.
Yeah, he can see everything that's happening at all times. It's like Bishop is having these weird TVs, except he's had like 500 years of practice to do this, right?
On the remote, yeah. Like he's got the universal remote.
He's got the Logitech Harmony of Time.
So they make it back to a weirdly unpopulated Egypt. Outside the pyramid to try to make it in. This is the genesis of the Lazarus chamber of the Revelations device of the Deuteronomy core.
This is 2000 pre-people.
Yes.
Like, excuse me? Do you not know? Do you not know Egypt? Come on, man.
Yeah,
cradle of civilization.
Yeah, very, very strange. Storm is going to create a sandstorm to create everybody, or to cover them getting in. Sandstorm is like a specific kind of weather that she can only do in these kind of areas.
Sure.
And Cyclops and Cable have a little bit of a heart-to-heart. Cyclops says, "Hey, I'm really sorry about your son," which is irony, because I don't think this actually ever says that Cable is his son.
Not at all. And Cyclops has some daddy issues. So the moment that he finds out that this is happening, he's going to freak out about it.
Oh yeah.
This leads to one of my favorite things in this episode, where Beast opens up the side of the pyramid and immediately gets shot. Just like they're quick. Because that's what fucking happens when you open up a pyramid, dog. Yeah. That's what happens. You're going to get shot by something.
Never played D&D and have never checked for traps, ever. You guys got to check traps.
Man.
When this is happening, too, like, before this happens, this is when they're having that philosophical conversation. Mm-hmm. Like, if he's the embodiment of all evil, like, can we actually destroy him? Like, does that make any sense? Should we be doing this? And it's like, well, he kills a lot of people. Beast, you guys superheroes, you gotta stop him from killing people. But it's almost like philosophically interesting.
And like, yeah, maybe we can't stop like evil with a capital E, but we can at least try to stop that guy.
Yeah.
That guy's just right there. Like, evil is a concept in your mind. No, we're not going to be able to remove the idea of evil out of every human being on the planet. Like, that sounds like some Xavier bullshit right there.
Yeah.
But no, we can at least try to stop the guy that's controlling time to his own whim. Let's at least attempt it.
When Beast gets shot, he gets shot by these weird prehistoric versions of the Horsemen.
I love these so much.
I like these guys too.
Awful.
These are like visionaries villains. Like, usually I use He-Man villain to be like the marker of crappy villain designs in the show, but these are straight up like visionaries. Like, these are not He-Man level.
This
designs.
is just, all of these are so bad. They have weird like knee pads around the horse's knees and everything. I just don't.
Yeah. A horse doesn't need knee pads, dog.
That's not what horses do with their knees.
Yeah.
I love that Hank McCoy, his first reaction to this is to go pick up some like extra construction material. Like, he just grabs a pyramid block, like throws it at this horseman. I don't know why that cracks me up so much.
They're continuing, just like they're the shittiest superhero team. They don't even really win this fight. They just run inside.
Yeah, they leave like Gambit behind, which, I mean, like, frankly, that's probably what you should do.
you deal with this. You get to join join these guys eventually in the future.
I was about to say, I vaguely remember that happening. So
yeah, he becomes Death.
Yeah, that's it.
On this team of people here, 3 of them have been Death at some point. Wolverine, Gambit, and Archangel have all been Death. So fully 50% of the team.
There's a scene coming up because this pyramid is full of traps, as we have established in the previous episode where we dealt with part 1 and part 2. But there's like a very basic like spike trap, right? Like there's a hole, like there's a false floor, fall in and hit the spikes, and Beast pretty handily like whips everybody over and tries and like holds out his hand to Logan as if to say like, hey, let me just swing you over because I'm Beast and I can do that. And Logan says, nah man, I'm gonna use my claws, and he jumps up, stabs the roof, and then somehow uses that to swing over. Like, what?
Yeah, I don't know how that works. Also, Beast has to carry Professor Xavier's levitating wheelchair over the gap. Yeah, like, did you forget this doesn't have wheels? It's not the Toy Biz toy version of it. Like, it hovers, man.
That thing is really huge to have like no electronic gimmick stuff in it. Like it never shoots any lasers. It never like a robotic arm doesn't like that. This thing should have Dr. Octopus arms in it at all times.
Yeah, he should get somebody on the team could do that. Get Jubilee the tech expert to like hook you up with
add some arms.
Claw. Yeah. So there's a little bit more fighting outside with the Horsemen. They actually go inside and seal it up. So the B team who's outside, who's Cyclops and Gambit, who are still outside, and Storm end up getting trapped outside. But the fight moves inside as they fight the Horsemen, eventually getting up to the chamber, winning, and they think they're going to actually finally destroy this chamber. But it's not Apocalypse, it's Mystique.
Yeah, and there's a great Wolverine line here.
I smell 2 rats in this barn.
Which is
that expression.
that old chestnut.
Yeah, a barn with 2 rats is, yeah.
But yeah, this is actually Mystique, and this is pretty much just like where the episode ends. Like they knock everybody out, and she finally captures Xavier, which they've been trying to do this whole time. And I think she grabs Wolverine too, and then she jets, right?
Yep. And then, Cable kind of wanders out. We go to the time stream. We see that they have Xavier, and that's how this episode ends.
Like we talked about this at the end of the previous episode, but this is where this starts going totally off the rails for me. Like this is intensely boring to me.
This episode? Yeah, this episode is straight up like End of the Phoenix Saga boring. Like this is extremely bad. And the thing I in recapping it and talking about it, I'm realizing what's wrong with the episodes that lead up to this is that they're all things that would make a perfectly fine episode that are somehow in service of this big dumb anticlimax. Like I want the wedding episode with the Nasty Boys. I want this episode, I don't want the Shi'ar part, but I would like the, Psylocke dealing with her brother. Like, what if that was a whole episode about Psylocke and she was stealing from rich mutants, which would include Xavier, because she thinks that like she could do more with that money through her brother, through like a foundation or something. It's a cool concept for an episode. We just had to, and this whole thing with this last episode where they go back to Egypt to do this could have just been the start of an episode. Cable shows up and says, hey, we have to get back to the beginning of that Lazarus chamber. I need your help. Bing, done. Like it would have been a fine episode on its own without being tied into this big dumb plot.
Because it is a big dumb plot. Because it's just
this
so
episode
fucking
is
boring.
Extremely hard to like pay attention to.
Yeah, and it should be good. Like this feels like they wanted it to be really really epic, but it just isn't at all.
Yeah.
Also, I know that we're we just don't ever go back to the Shi'ar at all. Like we're not even gonna bother with that. In case you guys wanted some closure, it's not gonna happen.
No, that empire is still being destroyed by Deathbird. So this moves us into part 4 of Beyond Good and Evil, End and Beginning. 2 of Apocalypse's former allies, the captive Wolverine, the loose cannon Cable, and the exiled Bishop, come together to free the kidnapped psychics and save reality from being rewritten.
That really
accurate.
Yeah, this is all good.
Yeah.
I do like that Bishop is just chilling and like watching all of this stuff. Like he's just Bishop is the most useless character in this series in this cartoon
until the end.
So far.
Yeah, he's just there to tag him in, for this final little bit.
And we didn't really talk about it, but it should be like stressed that every time Bishop is on the screen, so is this Bender character, and Bender is the fucking worst.
Yeah. We talked about Bender a lot in the last episode, but just keep in mind he hasn't gone anywhere, and we're gonna find out what he is and stuff too. In this episode, there's like Bender origins because he's some kind of time god. A part of this episode I probably rested my eyes during, but he is some kind of time god as well. Weirdly enough, so we start out. Bishop is watching everything, that's happening in the past with this terrible Bender character with all of his time stuff. We switch back to the people who weren't kidnapped, who are still in ancient Egypt, kind of playing the blame game on each other.
Mm-hmm. Archangel's really pissed off at Cable about this, and Cable's like, I don't really care. I don't know you. You're weird. I'm going to explode the pyramid. Bye.
Yeah.
Like,
don't you understand that I'm trying to undo the future, and all of these things that, you're sad because Psylocke has been kidnapped. It doesn't matter. Like, I learned Tyler's lesson. I'm trying to undo this thing. So he pulls out like this mega grenade. It's shaped a little bit like an asthma inhaler that is like about the size of like 1/4 of a Game Boy, and will blow up this entire pyramid.
Just explode it completely, which is really great. Like, that's a good device to have. Why didn't you start with that?
Yeah, why haven't you been using this your entire time? Like, you only have one of these apparently. But blows up this thing, which, like, there's still people in it presumably, and it doesn't actually accomplish their goal. So it kind of a big deal. However, since Xavier and all those people have been taken into the time axis, B says, like, hey, since Xavier has this tracking beacon, we can maybe use our Magic Metroid ship and Cerebro to track it and go through time.
Which is, like, kind of a cool twist, like the fact that they have developed this beacon, but, like, I mean, you could have just, sure, yeah, it's fine. I like that Apocalypse is looking at all this stuff too, and just basically being like, I didn't really need that Lazarus chamber anyway. That was just like keep me roided up. Like, yeah. I'm good.
And yeah, now that I am about to accomplish my plans to rewrite reality, I don't actually need this.
Yeah. We get a cool scene when he's like walking in to like check out all of the psychics that he's collected in his tubes. Mm-hmm. And I just want to call this out because this is a weird collection of characters. Like, we obviously have Psylocke kind of to the right, but we've also got what looks like Phoenix on the left hand side, like the not like Jean Grey Phoenix, but Rachel Summers Gray. Phoenix. Yeah. And then there's also, like, apropos of nothing, Silver Samurai. Like, does he have psychic powers?
That's Strife, my friend.
Oh my God, that's fucking Strife. Never mind. Yeah. I want to just turn off this fucking car. I'm done. I don't want to talk about Strife.
Not to explain to you, but
please don't. I don't want to talk about Strife.
No, what we talk about when we talk about Strife. We don't have to talk about Strife. I'm just glad Strife didn't get an episode.
Seriously.
Like, I'm kind of surprised because he was big in the 90s, but
maybe he was the planned season 6, right? Like the season long villain.
Main antagonist of like a bad 90s crossover I have a weird affection for, which is called the Executioner's Song. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of like this too. That does feature a big team up between Strife, Apocalypse, and Mr. Sinister. So this really is just kind of a big slam of a bunch of different storylines.
Yeah.
So Apocalypse makes Wolverine watch. He uses his psychics, like he's going to use his psychics to destroy everything. He eventually kind of explains his plan to Magneto, who, again, is not necessarily a bad guy, and would want to know what's going on. He's like, hey, you didn't tell me you were doing this. He explains his thing to Magneto, and essentially just to let the audience know exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And this is one of the all-time dumbest, like, not dumbest, but this requires so much buy-in for this plan to, like, for you to believe that this actually makes any kind of sense.
It's pretty ridiculous. Like, all of this is kind of stupid, right? Like, I just, and then, like, the fact that he has Wolverine chained up on the side while Apocalypse is doing all of this, like, if literally any other X-Men you could tie up and, like, make him watch your evil plot, but Wolverine, like, Wolverine is definitely the one that's going to eventually get out and fuck you up.
And why do you want Wolverine there at all? No good reason. So here's his plan.
That's a very weird specific fetish, just to have Wolverine watch you.
Wolverine watch. Yeah. His plan is to break down the good and evil balance of the universe by using the psychics to break time itself, destroying everything except for the Axis, and allows him to recreate the universe. And Magneto says, hold up, let's back up like 70 steps and explain what breaking time means. And that's what he should say. Instead, he says, hey, if you do that, you're not going to bring my wife back to life. And Apocalypse is like, of course I'm not, you goddamn idiot. You fool.
How did you ever think that I was going to do that? I would give a shit about your weird Bova wife. I don't care.
Yeah. And when the time thing starts going back, the color scheme turns to negative. like somebody had just done that in Microsoft Paint. It is like super, super strange. But of course, Magneto has a backup plan because Magneto is no fool.
Yeah. Magneto does come off looking fairly good about this. Like if he's going to join up like an evil superhero plan, a supervillain plan, at least he's got like one in the pocket too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So him and Mystique both turn on Apocalypse at this point. Like, hey, I'm only here. I'm in it for the Magna. And start fighting. Magneto is not as strong as Apocalypse, so it manages to knock him out and kind of slow him down, which ends up being the kind of important part here. After Apocalypse turns his hand into the jaws of life, and and zaps him. This is also where one of the this is Mystique, but it's one of the Horsemen betrays. It looks like a Horseman's betraying Apocalypse, so it's pretty cool. The weird skull faced one without the knee pads.
I do like to see Mystique and Magneto fighting together, if only because it just serves to, like, Mystique's powers are so like passive in 90% of everything that she does, right? Like, she could just turn into something. So like when she's doing a fight like this, when she's in a big fight, she just has a gun. Like she just has a laser pistol. That's her other secondary mutation is she carries a laser pistol and keeps it charged somehow.
And when she turned into Death, like BC Death, she had his powers, I think, could use it. Like, it is very unclear whether Mystique gets the powers of people she turns into or not. Same thing that happened with Morph.
Oh, yeah. We've talked about this, like, when he had Wolverine claws and, like, they cut off with the Wolverine claws. I was like, was that part of his body? Like, are his claws going to bleed? Because I think his claws should bleed, personally.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. So they knock Apocalypse out, and keep in mind they're floating in the time, like they're in the time axis. So they knocked Apocalypse out into time. His Horsemen show up. You think they're going to fight, but they just go out to save Apocalypse.
Yeah. And this is where they try to, because Sinister and the Nasty Boys show up, and Magneto's like, "Hey, look, this dude is fucked. Like, you don't want to do this. Like, come on my side." And Sinister's like, "Nah, I'm good. I'm still happy where I am. Like, I feel like I'm doing some good here."
Yeah, Sinister has no concrete wants or desires, and no motivations that are understandable by anyone. So he decides to stick with this insane plan to rewrite reality, presuming that maybe he'll be part of it.
But let's talk about how Apocalypse gets saved from being knocked out of the
I was just about to say, like him being lifted on each corner by one of the Horsemen is a really great image. Like a float, like a Macy's Day float.
It's so bad. Can he not fly? He can turn his body into anything. Why can't he fly?
I don't know. He just has to be lifted up by a horse with a knee pad.
He controls time. Just go back in time and not fall out of the time stream. It seems like an easy one right there.
I don't know. So they get into a fight. It's all the Nasty Boys, all the Horsemen, and Apocalypse against Mystique and Magneto. And this part's actually kind of cool because like they're the underdogs and they're who we're rooting for, and we actually spend some like significant time with them. They're just shooting beams, which is kind of a bummer. But I like those characters.
Yeah, the fight itself isn't like super great, but it's just nice that we're like have those guys on the screen for a little while. And Magneto runs over and frees Wolverine because you can't have a Chekhov's Wolverine without having to release it later. And they both Magneto and Mystique get blasted, but it's it's just more fighting. I think at this point Cable shows up. Is that right?
Yeah. Cable gets in there shortly after Wolverine is freed, and it's a clusterfuck of like pretty bad fights. Like the only people they're fighting are these dumb horses, for the most part. It is not an exciting fight the way you might think. Wolverine, Magneto, and Cable versus the Nasty Boys at the end of time would be. Like, it sounds a lot cooler than it is.
It definitely sounds a lot cooler than it is. I do kind of dig this weird like sci-fi scape that we're getting with the 12 psychics all lined up around the axis of time or whatever, like kind of slowly circling around, and all of them are in paint. Like, that's kind of cool. And like you start seeing things blink out of existence in those cool montages, like the Shi'ar blink out of existence, and I'm like, fuck yeah.
Thank God. Yeah. Please don't restore that.
There's some dudes wearing hats in New York City that start blinking out of existence, and that's definitely I'm into that as well. Like, get rid of any dudes wearing hats.
Yeah, don't like that. I was just discussing that recently with somebody that, like, in my experience, the louder and more ostentatious a hat someone wears, the less likely they are to be cool.
I'm
like, it's not always true, but like, just you see somebody in a hat, it's like, oh, here comes trouble. But then unfortunately the X-Men get blinked out of existence as well.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
Which I don't want, because then, we couldn't do the show, and I like the X-Men quite a bit.
Then we have to do Crisis of Infinite podcast.
Oh my God.
Go to switch to DC.
Yeah. All the all the psychics are getting drained here. So they're doing it. They're breaking time. And then they show like these little TV screens of different time eras. So like there's like a caveman getting fire, and then there's a satellite that gets blinked out and stuff. Like Mojo gets blinked out, so he does get an actual cameo in this. The caveman gets blinked out again. I don't know why.
The caveman definitely gets blinked out twice, and I don't understand why. It's super weird.
And here's where Bishop shows up. They're getting drained. They're doing this thing. Bishop learns that Bender is the person who built the Axis and maintains it. So he is like the time god Jander of this thing.
And his solution to this problem, like he learns that Bender is like a dude, and he basically learns that Bender's not going to do anything to help him. Like he's just like, okay, this exists, and like I maintain it, but I'm not going to fuck around with it at all. Bishop looks up and sees like these 12 psychics circling, which definitely sounds like a Christmas carol when I say it like that.
The worst 12 days of Christmas verse.
And now I want to do a whole song. Jesus Christ.
The way he solves this problem is very good.
He shoots it. He just shoots it with his gun. He just shoots the... What?
Zapping the psychics, and they're fine. Like Psylocke falls down and like is in front of him, and she's like, "Oh man, that sucked." And then he just starts zapping them, which causes Caveman TV to zap back into existence.
And everybody else too. Like the Shi'ar come back, like the dudes in the city wearing hats come back. Like everybody just starts blinking back in because I guess the like ring was broke or whatever. Yeah.
So they need to get those psychics back in a tube. So everyone starts attacking Bishop, and Bishop is pretty out of his league here. With Apocalypse and all of the Horsemen versus him. So they cut away from that fight back to the Axis where Wolverine is, and Wolverine starts fucking shit up. Eventually looking to destroy this time orb thing. But he does it by zapping like Mr. Sinister has like a gun or something, and he cuts the gun and knocks it into the time orb. Which is causing the time axis to start shaking and rumbling. And this is what actually causes everyone to come back.
Yeah. And then we get this weird, like, extended scene because this axis has, like, crumbled into floating, like, platforms as if you were playing, I don't know, like, Banjo-Kazooie on the Nintendo 64 or some shit. Now we've got a harder level. Now everything floats for no reason. And then there's like they're jumping from platform to platform and fighting one another, which, again, should be cooler than it is, but it just looks dumb.
It's at this point, it's just so confusing. Like the stakes are everything, but it hasn't felt like that this whole time. And it makes like now they're on these platforms, they can just zap the platforms and knock everybody out. So Apocalypse's plan is being messed up. He's still trying to fight and get revenge, but the Axis, it's falling apart. It's kind of out, in this fight that goes on, Magneto ends up getting shot by one of the Horsemen, I think.
Yeah.
Wolverine saves him, and then Magneto saves Wolverine. It's very cute. It's enemy of my enemy stuff.
It's definitely a meet cute. We can call it that.
Yeah. It is definitely a meet cute.
Now that is Hugh Jackman and Ian McKellen, or even who's new Magneto? I can never remember that dude's name. Prometheus.
I don't know.
Why did I want to say David Duchovny? That'd be a weird Magneto.
That would be a very strange choice, especially now.
Especially now. I could see that movie happening. Like, I want to see those dates.
Michael Fassbender.
Michael Fassbender. There you go.
There we go. Yeah.
But the outcome here is like Apocalypse is about to do some like crazy time orb shit, and then like Bishop just shoots it, and then all of the psychics are finally realizing like, oh yeah, we're psychics, we could probably do something.
Everyone remembers their powers, which is about what 90% of the episodes of the X-Men animated series end with, is people realizing like, hey, we have powers. So they wake up and they start using their powers. There's kind of a cool scene, like whenever they show all the psychics floating, and Xavier gives them a little speech. It's like, hey, you're going down, Apocalypse. They all put their hands to their head and start using their powers. Pretty cool. And they do this to do a big zap beam that zaps the Metroid Grey Malkin ship.
And then in turn zaps Apocalypse back into whatever.
Yeah,
like, who cares?
We don't know. Like, presumably the Lazarus Chamber is done. I think this is supposed to have the weight of like them actually killing Apocalypse forever. Since this is so off model from the comic, I don't know that what this is supposed to be. Doing this, everyone, now that Apocalypse is gone, everybody zaps back to their time. Bender turns into fucking Immortus, I think, is who that's supposed to be.
Which is somebody wrote into the Twitter, and I apologize. This has been months ago that you wrote it in, so I forget your name, but that said it was Immortalis or Mortis or whatever his name is, and that's a Fantastic Four villain, which I'm not super familiar with. Like I like the Fantastic Four, but like trying to find good Fantastic Four media is really, really hard to do. So.
Yeah, there's a cartoon I think of the Fantastic Four, like a '90s Fantastic Four cartoon, possibly.
Wow,
that's
really
true, but there might be. There's definitely a shitty '70s one. And all this is now that we're in postscript, it's like we dodged that bullet kind of, let's all go back, to normal, Xavier and Magneto are like, hey, you shouldn't have joined up with them. I know, et cetera, et cetera. Cable doesn't care that he won. He's just like, I just have to go home to my son, because you can't make Cable happy, no matter what. So he solo flies the ship back.
Sorry, I got distracted by Fantastic Four DVD, which I could totally buy right now if I wanted to.
That would have literally been the end of the series, is Cable flying back through time to his son that nobody likes. And they wanted that to be the end of the X-Men animated series.
Congratulations, we did it. We put these two characters that you had never heard of back together again. Woo!
Yeah, aren't you happy? There's no grand kind of repurposing of the X-Men thesis. There's nothing. There's no way this could have or should have been an ending. And I'm glad it wasn't actually the end. And I am we kept saying this seems cooler than it is. The problem with this is that the stakes are too dumb. I'm going to erase time using a psychic orb at the axis of everything shit is too dumb.
Yep.
For us to really get invested in.
Totally agreed with you on that. It's just fucking stupid, and it doesn't feel like it went anywhere. Nothing changed. So these characters on the other side, we do get kind of a group upsetting where Jean kisses Psyche and Bishop hugs his sister. And I guess Angel hits on Psylocke. I'm not sure what's happening there, but we get that, but nothing actually changed. These characters didn't go through anything. They come out on the other side of this, and they could just go get back in the honeymoon car and go to their honeymoon now.
Yeah.
Wow, that was weird. See you next week, everybody. It's just there's nothing to it.
And then there's just no next week. It doesn't make any sense. There's no. Even Cable didn't learn anything. He accomplished literally the point of his character and just was like, I'm going back to my son, and then jumped back into his flying Metroid and goes back to the future. It is a weirdly non-impactful episode. If you put a gun to my head and said write a 4-episode storyline of this cartoon that brings all of the major villains together, I'm not saying that I wouldn't have maybe leaned towards something like this. I like to think that I could have executed, or not even me, that anyone could have executed this better.
I think what I would like to see is a lot of the X-Men villains being double crossed, but not because they are working for Apocalypse and Apocalypse came to them and was like, tell me your greatest wish. Okay, you want your wife alive? I can do that. Sure, yeah, just do these horrible things for me. Not because of that, but Apocalypse actually being kind of a puppeteer with all of these villains, and the X-Men continually having to go up with what they think are for standard motives, and it turns out to be not that. And then maybe have the villains join the X-Men at the end of the episode for one grand fight, but also have to have something for the stakes. You have to, and shit has to change, right? If you're going to go back in time and fuck with stuff, all of a sudden, click, Beast doesn't exist anymore. Wouldn't that be great, everybody? I mean, a great plot point. I definitely don't mean it great that he'd be not there anymore, but
yeah, it just out of my head, just thinking of one thing that could happen.
Definitely don't have fan fiction about this particular subject.
And that's literally part of the definition of story.
Yeah,
character development is when a character goes through something and changes. And it just literally didn't happen here. And this plot, this time travel stuff about good and evil, there are some philosophical ideas, but it was not tied up into the X-Men well enough, to where if the X-Men had stopped him and hey, what is it, is it meaningful that we continue to fight evil when we just keep getting drawn back into it? They've had characters pose that question. You guys just seem to make things worse every time you do stuff. There was a chance for introspection and change in this, and it didn't happen because of conservatively 20 minutes we spent on a Psylocke subplot to get her in there. We spent probably 1/5 of this whole cartoon, and then another 1/5 dealing with Space Janitor Robin Williams. it's just a bad use of time.
With a lot of these X-Men animated series episodes, like the deeper we get, like the more I feel like I'm just wasting my time doing it. Thank God. Like I would either be wasting my time just watching this once, but like I'm so glad that we have this podcast so that we can waste more time talking about this show that wastes our time.
Like it's a fun show, but like it is definitely beyond a shadow of a doubt gets worse as it goes.
Oh yeah.
Like so much so. Like the next season I think opens up with the Phalanx Covenant.
Yes.
Which is another storyline I have dumb affection for that's not good. Like it is an extremely bad story that I still like because I read it when it came out.
In my list, I still have that at season 4. Like I still have that as.
Maybe that's the case. Like I just yeah. But that's what I think is coming up soon. If not next. And like that is such a complicated, dumb storyline. And if they actually go through to explain it, like we are just literally in continuity bonkers town for the rest of the series. And I'm looking forward to whatever we decide to do after the X-Men animated series. I'm looking forward to going through this arc over and over again as a show starts out as with lots of promise because they're adapting the main storylines of their respective properties, and then slowly, just as they have to reach for more and more obscure and worse storylines, just get worse and worse.
Which is why I like the recent trend for shows to get the opportunity to end themselves.
Yeah,
there's a comedy that I like on FX or FXX or FXXX. I can't keep up with whatever the thing it is, but it's called You're the Worst. It's really good. Like it does like a reasonably good job of dealing with like a character's depression and still like being funny and jokey and stuff. And they just announced that it was ending, and I'm just so fucking happy. I'm just glad that they're going to get a chance to write endings for the characters because they just don't spin it out over 20 fucking years. Like you just don't need to do that sometimes.
Yeah,
imagine how good the show would have been if they said like you get 50 episodes, write a 50 episode cartoon. Yeah.
Perpetual entertainment is almost never good. Like there can be individual good arcs within it, but like it's never good as a whole. You take something like the X-Men, which I love. The X-Men, is the X-Men good as a comic? You can't answer that question, right? Like it's not a unanswerable question.
Yeah, that's like asking, is grass good? Like, well, I mean, like,
sometimes.
I mean, sure, yeah. I mean, like, which grass is what you gotta ask? Like, what does the grass do? Like, what are you doing with the grass? Like, it just doesn't, like, it's not a question that you can easily answer because it's happened for, I mean, what are we on, like 50 or 60 years of X-Men comics at this point?
Yeah. It's not, is Time Magazine good? I don't know. Like at times it was fine. Is Saturday Night Live good? Well, like maybe it is at a certain point, but it's not for large other portions.
Yeah.
Of time. Like it is very hard to evaluate a perpetual project. And this cartoon
like
is becoming that.
I'm going to give you my top 12 Time Magazine issues from this year. That's my top my top list.
Or of all time. There's a comedian who talked about that. How like. When you say like, oh, have you seen this show? And it's like Lost or something. And they're like, oh, you got to watch it. And that's you saying like, hey, watch 70 hours of TV.
Yeah.
And it's the equivalent of being like, oh man, like, have you read Newsweek? It's incredible. Read Newsweek. And it just means like, catch up on the backlog.
Sure.
Of such.
That's such a weird thing. I've totally exercised that for my vocabulary too. Like I'm eager for people to watch things that I like, and I'll recommend stuff. But it's never like, oh, you have to watch this, or I can't believe you haven't watched that, because like people have different fucking like lives. Like I don't care. I haven't seen Godfather 3. I'm sorry. Like I know it's probably bad enough to watch at this point, and I should probably have some cultural relevancy. But I'm just not going to do it. Like, I'm just not going to do it. Like I'm just not going to bother with it. So sorry.
Yeah, recommendations are acts of violence.
Yeah, they are fraught with problems. So
yeah,
are we good?
Yeah, I think that's good. I think we've done it. Yeah. So is it the what's coming up next? Is it the?
It is the Phalanx Covenant. Yeah.
Okay. Phalanx Covenant is up next.
There's a part 1 and a part 2, and then that's followed by Stormfront part 1, part 2, which I hope is not actually what I'm picturing in my head.
Can I tell you at least one thing I know happens in Stormfront?
Sure.
It's about them going to another alien planet and Storm not liking them because of issues of cultural relativity. Like it is them going to it. Like it deals with them going and dealing with aliens and Storm not liking the aliens.
Oh, good. I don't want to spoil the episode the episode description. Like, I'm not going to read the whole thing because those are usually we get some comedy value out of that. But the very first sentence starts with the dashing alien Archon.
Okay. Yep.
Does that mean that he has dashing powers or that he is just handsome?
I would love
what
it
is
if he had dashing powers?
God, can he
look
could just
at him
air
dash.
dash? Like, that's his power. I could jump up in the air and dash a little ways.
He's got iframes.
Eminently useful in video games is not useful whatsoever in the real world.
Man. So that's what we have coming up. Thanks everybody for listening to the show. If you want to support the show and the network, the best way to do so is to support us on Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv, you can check out what we have on offer and, what you get in exchange and what we have coming up and all those things. Very, very useful.
And if you can't do that, if you can't support us directly like that, that's no problem. Listening to the show is really, really valuable. Telling your friends about the show. Leaving a review on iTunes or a rating is also extremely helpful to kind of bump us up in the charts so that more people can get exposed to the show. And we like that. That'd be very nice of you to tell us how you feel about it.
Yeah. And you can follow me on Twitter at Gary Buh, at GaryBuh. You can follow Jeremy at JG Greer on Twitter. And you should listen to Jeremy's other shows, Monster of the Week and Don't Give Up Skeleton.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for listening. And we love you. And good night.
Good night.